Grüezi miteinander. Ganz herzlich willkommen, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, zu einer weiteren Sondersendung von Weltwoche Daily aus Berlin. Wir haben hier einen sehr interessanten Vortrag erlebt von Dr. Joanna Lei aus Taipei, aus Taiwan. Sie ist eine Oppositionspolitikerin. Sie hat im Westen in den Vereinigten Staaten studiert, auch Führungsfunktionen wahrgenommen in der amerikanischen Medienindustrie. Sie hat an Verhandlungen teilgenommen im Rahmen taiwanischer Delegationen mit China. Und sie ist eine unkonventionelle Kommentatorin des Weltgeschehens, insbesondere des Themas China, denn Frau Lei plädiert für einen Frieden zwischen China und Taiwan, und sie hat uns eben erklärt in ihrem Vortrag, warum sie sich größte Sorgen macht über Politiker aus dem Westen, die nach Taipei reisen, um dort Bilder zu machen und damit China provozieren. Sie hat von der Gefahr eines Krieges gesprochen und von der Notwendigkeit, diesen Krieg unbedingt zu verhindern. Ich werde das Gespräch auf Englisch führen und versuchen, so gut wie möglich das jeweils zu übersetzen. Well, Dr. Lei, thank you very much for joining us. Danke vielmals, dass Sie hier dabei sind. Thank you very much for joining us. Your most important point in your impressive presentation was we have to make peace with China. The world should not sleepwalk into a huge war. Why is it so important for Taiwan to have peace with China? And why is there a danger of war at the moment?
Well, Taiwan and mainland China has been in the opposite end for over 72 years. But in the last 64 years, we had no war in between. So there's no reason that we have to go into war at this point. So the whole idea of promoting peace agenda in the total discussion of democracy, of liberty, of equality, making it a wholesome discussion when we look at differences in systems will be important. Namely, Taiwan simply have no room to retreat to. We are extremely small. 36,000 square kilometer, 24 million people. We are 6% of Ukrainians' land base. We are 1/58th of China's population. So if there were a war, there will be a massive destruction on Taiwan, on the life and lifestyle as we know it. Okay. There's no winning.
Okay. Let me shortly übersetzen. Ja, also Frau Lei sagt, es sei schlicht eine Notwendigkeit der Existenz Taiwans. Wenn es einen Krieg gäbe mit China und die Umstände verdüstern sich, dann hätte das einfach zur Konsequenz, dass Taiwan zerstört würde. Das wäre eine suizidale Strategie, und man muss vielleicht vorausschicken, dass sie diese Kritik äußert vor vor dem Hintergrund einer etwas konfrontativen Politik, die jetzt regierende DPP, die DPP-Partei in Taipei vorantreibt. Sie hat gesagt, man habe auch 70 Jahre jetzt fast Frieden gehabt mit China, und es sei auch gelungen, da die Verhältnisse einigermaßen zu stabilisieren. You have said in your presentation that the relationship between Taiwan and China has severely deteriorated after the visit of Nancy Pelosi in Taipei. I have to say that also Swiss politicians, German politicians, they are, you could say, on an actual pilgrimage to Taiwan. They want to support your country. They say in our media, we have to help Taiwan. We have to defend them against the evil Chinese. That's why we are going to Taipei. What's your comment on these politicians from the West, and especially what is your comment on the visit of Nancy Pelosi in Taipei?
Very quickly, all of these supports are certainly appreciated, but after they came and went, there was little remain. It's like footsteps on the beach. You don't see anything remaining. On the other hand, the relationship between Taiwan and mainland China is extremely tangible. For example, half of our export are to China. If without the export to China, we would be in severe trade deficit. All of our trade surpluses came from trade with China. Every year, we also have almost 3 to 4 million people traveling freely to China. 1.5 million people either school, studying, or working in China. So while it's easy to see China as the big bad wolf, bad neighbor next door, it actually provided Taiwanese business opportunity, education, and career opportunities.
Frau Lei hat gesagt, ja, diese Besuche seien gut gemeint und sie wolle das jetzt hier auch nicht stark kritisieren, aber man müsse sehen, im Resultat hinterlasse das dann keine Spuren im Sand, ganz im Gegenteil. Es würde in China eher als Provokation, als starke Provokation empfunden und Taiwan könne sich nicht leisten, hier alle Brücken abzureißen, denn China sei bei allen Unterschieden zu Taiwan ein großer Wirtschaftspartner. Und man habe da auch sehr viele Zusammenhänge, viele Zusammenarbeit in Sachen Bildung, die da wichtig sind. Let's talk again. Yes, and wir werden jetzt noch einmal über den Visit von Frau Pelosi sprechen. I would just add, I mean, you mentioned before that this visit had a huge impact. It was like a turning point in recent history as far as the approach, as far as the attitude of Chairman Xi Jinping towards Taiwan is concerned. Can you explain the impact of the Pelosi visit on the relationship between China and Taiwan?
I will make 2 points about the Pelosi visit. Pelosi visit was a very good photo opportunities showing U.S. support for Taiwan. However, after she was gone, the median line in Taiwan Strait, which was a hypothetical dotted line that either party
It was like a border in the sea.
Right. Each side do not cross over to the other side. That median line simply disappeared. China no longer observed the understanding of a median line. They sent lots of sorties across the median line. So in reality, we lost the protection of our understanding that no one cross over to the other side.
Let me just translate. Also sie hat gesagt, der Besuch von Frau Pelosi, der habe eine großartige Fotogelegenheit für Frau Pelosi gebracht, aber für Taiwan ganz verheerende Konsequenzen, denn China habe dies als eine Intervention, eine Einmischung der Amerikaner empfunden, also Intervention of America, und aus diesem Grund nicht mehr respektiert die inoffizielle Demarkationslinie in der Straße zwischen Taiwan und China. Und jetzt hätten eben die Chinesen diese inoffizielle Respektgrenze überschritten. Und das heiße, dass eben hier eine Art Umkreisung und stärkere Bedrohung von Taiwan plötzlich da ist, als Reaktion auf die von China als Einmischung wahrgenommene Besuchsdiplomatie von Nancy Pelosi. That was the first point. You wanted to make a second point.
Right. The second point is about Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping has been in power for a long, long time, but the most stern statement he made was after Nancy Pelosi's visit. They issued a third white paper towards Taiwan. In the white paper, they stipulated that Taiwan independence and foreign intervention are the two conditions for unification by force.
Ganz wichtiger Punkt. Sie erwähnt hier ein drittes sogenanntes White Paper von Xi Jinping, dem Präsidenten, dem Kaiser von China. We call him the Emperor of China here, the new Emperor of China. As Putin is the Tsar of Russia. So Xi Jinping hat gesagt, jetzt gibt es neue Bedingungen, dass China könnte eine Wiedervereinigung mit Taiwan durch Gewalt anstreben. Und das ist allem voran eine Intervention einer ausländischen Macht. Und das war ganz klar gerichtet an die Adresse der Vereinigten Staaten. Dear Dr. Lei, I mean, I am, and you too, we are friends of the United States. We are not enemies of the United States. We respect the contribution and the sacrifice that the United States did for preserving world peace, for destroying terrible dictatorships here in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. But we are critical friends. We are friends who tell our friends also when they're on the wrong path. I had the impression when I was listening to your talk that the United States, the current government, is playing with Taiwan. They're using Taiwan, they're misusing Taiwan for their war, for their economic war against China. The Americans, let me put it bluntly, they have just a great ego problem. They cannot accept there is a second great self-confident player on the field of world economics, so therefore they want to prevent it, and they are recklessly using Taiwan for their purposes with no regard for the security and prosperity and interest of Taiwanese people. Now, this is a very provocative way of putting it, but am I completely wrong? That's how I understood a little bit your presentation. Ich habe nur kurz gesagt, ich habe den Eindruck, dass die Vereinigten Staaten Taiwan benutzen, um ihr riesiges Ego-Problem gegen China zu lösen. Die Amerikaner werden einfach nicht mit der Tatsache fertig, dass China wirtschaftlich aufsteigt. Eine etwas provokative Feststellung. Mal sehen, was Frau Lei dazu sagt. Yeah, what's your take on that?
Well, in terms of the economic size, China was 12% of the US GDP in year 2001 when it entered into WTO. Now it is about 80% of US GDP. So in all senses, it is a peer competitor to the United States. And for the interest
Also China ist groß aufgestiegen zum wirklichen Konkurrenten der Vereinigten Staaten.
So for the United States, it's to its best interest to not allowing this competition to go further. Taiwan becomes a very easy handle to poke mainland China in the eye.
Also Taiwan wird zu einem Instrument, um dem chinesischen Panda-Bären ins Auge zu stacheln. Do you see that the US is trying to use Taiwan as an outpost of geopolitical influence, of containment of China? Benutzt Amerika Taiwan als geopolitischen Außenposten, um China einzudämmen?
Absolutely, because in terms of their new strategy, Taiwan is seen as part of the expeditionary warfare base. So they are currently sending people training, arming us with specific kind of articles to work in joint operability with the US military. So Taiwan, while we don't have diplomatic relationship, we don't have military alliance, but we are seen as part of the general US theater in the Far East.
Also es ist tatsächlich zu beobachten, dass die Amerikaner hier Taiwan zu einer Art geopolitischem Außenposten machen wollen. Das sieht man auch an verschiedenen Formen der Zusammenarbeit, von Verträgen, von auch militärischen Operationen, die man da zusammen in Erwägung ziehen möchte. You mentioned in your talk as well, in your presentation, in your speech, that there are some disturbing developments within Taiwan. You have the ruling DPP party, which is for independent Taiwan, which has, to my understanding, a bit the confrontational tone, probably towards China. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but what you said before is that DPP is somehow building back, is a bit eroding the democratic rule of law in Taipei, which goes a bit against the Western propaganda song that we are defending with our policy democracies. We are just for democracies. What's happening with Taiwanese democracy? Meine Frage ist, sie hat im Vortrag erzählt, dass die regierende Partei die Demokratie zurückgefahren habe in China, in Taiwan, und das sei problematisch, denn wegen dieser Konfrontationspolitik mit China sei Taiwan im Begriff, ihre eigene Rechtsstaatlichkeit und Freiheit abzubauen, und das hat sie kritisiert. Was ist mit der Demokratie in Taiwan los?
Well, Taiwan is usually seen as a value partner of the West. It's touted as the best democracy in Asia. But since 2016, when Tsai Ing-wen gained her election, gained power, there were numerous laws being passed. I'll name three. One is the party law that restricted the political parties in terms of its way, shape, form, and operations.
Lass mich kurz sagen, also Taiwan gilt eigentlich als Musterdemokratie in Asien, doch seit einigen Jahren, seit dem zweiten Wahlerfolg der DPP 2016, seien verschiedene Gesetze erlassen worden, die demokratische Parteien, Mitbewerber benachteiligen. Zum Beispiel die Regel Nummer 1. Can you repeat rule number 1 again, please?
They passed a party law, and with that they canceled the registration of over 100 political parties and 42 political organizations.
Sie haben ein Gesetz gemacht, nachdem sie dann nachher 100 politische Parteien eigentlich streichen konnten, canceln konnten und 42 andere politische Organisationen, also eine massive Abholzung der parteipolitischen Vielfalt. Second law.
The second was ill-gotten party asset law. With that, they confiscated the asset of their opposition party KMT, KMT's affiliate.
KMT is the party of Chiang Kai-shek, Kuomintang, that's the founding party of Taiwan.
Right. So they confiscated the property of KMT, KMT affiliates, KMT investment companies, KMT local chapters. In addition to that, they extended to organizations friendly with KMT.
Also das sind auch bemerkenswerte Dinge, die hier erzählt werden. Also mit einem zweiten Gesetz habe die Regierung einfach die Parteivermögen konfisziert von KMT. Das ist die Kuomintang, meine Damen und Herren. Das ist die Partei, die Taiwan gegründet hat, von Chiang Kai-shek, dem Staatsgründer. Und da ist also massiv eingegriffen worden ins Parteivermögen dieser großen Oppositionspartei in Taiwan aufgrund dieser verschärften, wie Frau Dr. Lei sagt, demokratiebeschädigenden Gesetze. The third rule?
And the third one was they changed the pension given to the military, the police, the educators, the teachers, and the civil servants. These were commitments made by KMT government, and DPP rescinded a lot of them, changed under the name of pension reform. In other words, they went back and took away people's property rights.
Drittes Gesetz, man habe die Pensionsfonds verschiedener wichtiger Gruppen im Staat, der Polizeikräfte, auch der Armee zurückgefahren und so Eigentumsrechte eingeschränkt. Why did they do that? Warum haben sie die Polizei? Why did they do that? Why did they go against the army? Why did they go against the police? This doesn't sound very reasonable.
Because they feel that these group of people would have a stronger affiliation with KMT and therefore may not vote for them during the campaign time.
Also das sind Unterstützer der Oppositionspartei. Do you have a fourth rule?
You don't hear any of this because if you are from the opposition media, your licenses can be revoked. They actually took away television license of the opposition media.
Ein vierter Punkt, dass man darüber gar nicht berichten könne in Taiwan, liege daran, dass eben ein Gesetz erlassen wurde, mit dem die Regierung kritischen Medienstationen die Lizenz entziehen kann. Also ganz klar Entwicklungen, die einen mit Sorge erfüllen. Excuse, you want to add something? Sie möchten etwas ergänzen?
Yeah. Therefore, unlike the beautiful facade of liberal democracy, it's just a movie set. The reality is moving into a illiberal democracy, taking away people's right to freedom of speech, right to association and property rights, and even to the extent of condemning their oppositions so that it becomes an electoral autocracy.
Also vor der Fassade einer Scheinfreiheit und Scheindemokratie habe sich eine elektorale Autokratie ausgebreitet im Gefolge dieser Konfrontationspolitik. How probable, wie wahrscheinlich, Frau Dr. Lei, ist es, dass es demnächst zu einem Krieg zwischen China und Taiwan kommen könnte? How probable is it that that a war starts between China and Taiwan. We have seen a scenario in Ukraine where the Russians had the feeling that NATO was somehow using Ukraine as an outpost with their nuclear capabilities, and Russia was saying, no, we are not accepting this. They went in a terrible act of a breach of international law. Do you expect China to behave in a similar way when they see that the United States are really holding an iron grip on your island? Glaubt sie, dass die Chinesen, wenn sie beobachten, dass die Amerikaner Taiwan zu einem Außenposten machen, dass sie dann hineingehen wie die Russen? Die Russen sagen ja auch, wir sind in die Ukraine hineingegangen, weil die Amerikaner daraus einen NATO-Außenposten mit Atomraketen machen wollten. Ja, could China behave similarly than Russia?
That is a probability if one of two things happen, like in the third white paper. If Taiwan declare formal independence, and or if it's determined that the US is directly intervening into the island's affair.
Also dieser Krieg wird wahrscheinlich, wenn zwei Dinge passieren, wenn Taiwan seine formelle Unabhängigkeit erkläre und wenn zweitens die Vereinigten Staaten direkt intervenieren in diesen Konflikt. Now let's have a look at the silver. Excuse me, yes, you want to add something?
If these two things don't happen, then the time is still on our side for the two sides to negotiate a peaceful resolution going forward.
Also, sie hat meine Frage gleich vorweggenommen. Ich habe nach dem Hoffnungsschimmer gefragt, hat sie gesagt, den gibt's, wenn jetzt beide Seiten eine friedliche Lösung bringen. Let me ask you something. I mean, here in the West, my friends in media, my friends in politics, they say, well, we are also for friendly coexistence, but you have to see, China is a dictatorship. China wants to rule the world. Xi Jinping is an autocratic leader like Mao. You cannot make peace with these people. They're trying to subdue everything. They want to have world dominance. China is a danger for world peace. And therefore, we have to help in Taiwan those politicians who go after China, who want to build Taiwan into the Western world, into an anti-China. What do you say to these people in the West who think that Xi Jinping and China is the greatest danger? I have to say, you are from a family which has very, very bad experience with Chinese. You are not a China understander. You are not a China propagandist. On the contrary, your grandparents have been killed during the Cultural Revolution. Ich wollte nur sagen, ich habe Sie gefragt, was sagt sie unseren Politikern und Medienleuten, die China zur Weltgefahr darlegen? Und ich habe gesagt, sie ist nicht eine Propagandistin Chinas, im Gegenteil, ihre Familie hat schwerstens gelitten unter den Chinesen. Ihre Großeltern sind umgebracht worden während der Kulturrevolution. Yeah, what do you say these China hawks in the West?
Well, the depiction of China, as you said it, was exactly right in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, when China wasn't even able to feed its own population and possess a huge threat to the rest of the world. But if we move fast forward to today, China resolved over $400 million people's poverty issues. They lifted over 400 million people from extreme poverty, and also is helping the other developing nation to build infrastructure, schools, universities, hospitals, and roads and harbors. So why is China today a threat? I understand that it was a big threat in the past when my father served in the Navy and fought them. But today's China is more than just a threat. It is a big contributor to the world economy, contributing to over 36% of the GDP growth worldwide.
Also sie sagt, in den 50er, 60er, 70er und 80er Jahren war China eine große Bedrohung, war es ein fürchterlicher Staat, der nicht einmal seine eigenen Leute ernähren konnte, mit sehr, sehr vielen Opfern, aber es hat sich eben auch sehr viel verändert. China hat 400 Millionen Menschen aus absoluter Armut in einen relativen Wohlstand gebracht. Sie machen Entwicklungshilfe, sie bauen Infrastrukturen und man müsse bereit sein, auch die Veränderungen Chinas anzuerkennen. Say something about Xi Jinping. He's a leader who is fascinating and also irritating and frightening the world, especially the West. We see a new Dr. Strangelove syndrome on the side of the Americans. You know that movie from Stanley Kubrick, Dr. Strangelove from the Cold War. What is your take on Xi Jinping? What kind of leader is he? What is the China that he wants to see? What is the world that he wants to see, in your eyes?
Xi Jinping's cardinal sin in the eyes of Western democracy was he extended his term to the third term. It was seen as an unconscionable move. However, he's also someone who's lived in the marginal part of China, experienced extreme poverty, and have a strong commitment to the South-South cooperation to help the even more underdeveloped country.
So he's not the bad guy, he's not the evil emperor.
Right, because he had seen poverty. I think anybody who's experienced those extreme poverty would understand that it's a very important issue for us to address directly.
Also Xi Jinping ist ein Mann, der aus einer Gegend Chinas stamme mit extremer Armut und der sei darauf konzentriert, eigentlich diese Armut zu beseitigen. And because he's dedicated to getting rid of poverty, you would say that he's not interested in a irrational dictatorship which builds solely on military force and tyranny against people. You would say because he's primarily oriented in creating wealth, that he will have a policy which we can live with.
It is the global view of traditional Chinese. It's not just Xi Jinping's view, but the traditional Chinese has always believed that you have to spread the commonwealth across the world. And let's just put a comparison. United States has over 750 to 800 military bases around the world. China has over 1,000 projects building things around the world. Who is the big bad wolf?
Und noch zur Ergänzung, die Amerikaner haben über 800 Militärbasen auf der ganzen Welt. Die Chinesen würden über 1000 Infrastrukturprojekte bauen. Wer ist da der große böse Wolf? Just a short take on the Belt and Road Initiative, also controversially discussed. They say it's like a means of dominating the world, of making the world dependent on China. What is the Belt and Road Initiative? Was ist die Seidenstraße hier, die bei uns ja auch zum Teil kritisiert wird? Wie sieht Dr. Lei diese Seidenstraße?
I worked in the investment world. If you are the leader of a developing nation, you want to build roads, airports, or harbors, you probably have no room of funding because World Bank doesn't give you big funding. The ones that's more than $1 billion are very few to come by, and you need to have sovereignty guarantee. So Belt and Road Initiative allows mainland China to bring its technology, its funding, its workers to other parts of the world, building an infrastructure that will then develop that local economy for them to then buy into China's technology and goods. So it is a virtuous circle to build a better world economy and bigger world economy.
Also sie beurteilt die Belt and Road Initiative positiv. Sie sagt, so könne China ihre Technologie exportieren und in armen Ländern, die dazu nicht in der Lage sind, Infrastrukturen aufbauen und so eben auch die Weltökonomie in Gang halten. You are advocating, you are proposing a semi-autonomous status, a special relationship between Taiwan and China, some kind of Finlandization of Taiwan, autonomy, but also one China. Now, one could argue that the way China treated Hong Kong, a former independent, market-oriented colony of the British Empire, as soon as they had control, as soon as they had the grip, those promises were just empty air, and the Chinese were crushing democracy and the freedom of speech in Hong Kong. What makes you so sure that China would in negotiations not promise everything to Taiwan, but that soon, as you are somehow reunified, everything is gone? Also ich habe Sie gefragt, wie sieht Sie das Beispiel Hongkong? Ist Hongkong nicht ein abschreckendes Beispiel, das zeigt, dass man eben mit China so eine Art Finnland-Lösung, eine Art Teilautonomie für Taiwan nie erreichen könne? So what's your take on Hong Kong?
First of all, Taiwan is entirely different from Hong Kong. Hong Kong was repatriated to China after 99 years of colonization.
Also Hongkong könnte man nicht vergleichen, das sei quasi wieder eingegliedert worden in China nach 99 Jahren Colonial Rule. Das sei etwas ganz anderes als Taiwan.
That's why you can argue that Hong Kong was always a part of China. Hong Kong was only promised a different of system. And the 2019 event in Hong Kong, in my mind, actually was the turning point. After the 2019 event, mainland China decided to use a stronger fist, crushing on the local independence for fear of foreign intervention.
Also Hongkong sei ein Beispiel dafür, wie eben die Chinesen ganz hart einfahren, wenn sie das Gefühl haben, dass es eine ausländische Intervention gibt. Do you think that in these NGOs there were entities like CIA and other Western organizations trying to stir up heat, to create tension? Glaubt sie, dass in den NGOs, zum Beispiel die amerikanische CIA und andere westliche Organisationen, die Spannungen angestachelt hätten in Hongkong?
I can only make our observation from Taiwan. In the local organizations supporting the 2019 event, they had equipments that we never saw in Taiwan, including gas masks and all these things that we never saw in Taiwan. So there's got to be a massive logistics system and support from whoever.
Also Sie können sich da nicht auf die Äste hinauslassen, aber es habe sicher Unterstützung für diese oppositionellen Gruppen aus dem Ausland gegeben, weil die Material gehabt hätten, das man da nicht gesehen habe. So what's your vision for Taiwan and China in the future? How should they coexist? What kind of model do you have in mind? Welche Art von Koexistenz kann sie sich vorstellen zwischen China und Taiwan?
Political scientists have studied different form of affiliation. Like you can have a United Union, you can have Commonwealth, you have different form and strength of relationship. If we take the current situation in mainland China, for example, you have a direct administrative control area, you have autonomous area, you also have Hong Kong and Macau. There are 3 different levels.
Also es gibt unterschiedliche Levels der Zusammenarbeit, unterschiedliche Modelle, das ist nicht alles nur ein Monoblock. So what's the right model for Taiwan?
None of the above, because even in the Hong Kong-Macau situation, it was only guaranteed by law. And we believe that since Taiwan was never a part of the PRC regime, the relationship across Taiwan Straits will have to be at the constitution level, not the legal law level.
Interessant. Also der verfassungsmäßige Status von Taiwan sei ein ganz anderer als bei Hongkong und Macau, ehemaligen Kolonien des Westens. Und Frau Lei plädiert dafür, dass eben Taiwan auf der Verfassungsstufe, das ist jetzt etwa staatsrechtliche Detailarbeit, auf der Verfassungsstufe und nicht auf der Lawstufe da geregelt würde. Mit anderen Worten, dass es eben eine friedliche Koexistenzlösung geben kann. And if I understood you correctly, the Chinese chair people, even Xi Jinping, they have been in favor of such a path to you could say semi-autonomous Taiwan. Hu Jintao, one of the predecessors of Xi Jinping, has paved the way in that direction, but also Xi Jinping has some sympathies for that path. Is that correct?
Exactly. For example, Xi Jinping passed the 3rd white paper, but Hu Jintao actually passed the anti-succession law. In other words, all Chinese leaders will have in their mind a historical duty to keep Taiwan as part of the Greater China. So long as Taiwan is affiliated or annexed to the Greater China, they would have already served their historical duty.
Also die chinesischen Leader von Hu Jintao bis Xi Jinping haben sich zum Auftrag gemacht, die Integrität des größeren China zu gewährleisten, und welchen Status man darin genau dann Taiwan gebe, das sei offen. Deshalb bleibt Frau Lei zuversichtlich, was hier die Entwicklung der chinesisch-taiwanesischen Beziehungen angeht. Let's come to the last question. I'm from Switzerland. Switzerland is a very international country. We have huge investments in the Chinese market. There are now voices in our politics as well, in our government, who take a more confrontational stand against China. There are calls that Swiss companies should reduce their investments in China, that China is not a reliable partner, it's somehow dangerous. What are you telling, what are you saying, what are you suggesting Swiss companies as far as China investments are concerned, and what are you probably giving, what kind of advice are you giving to the Swiss government? What attitude should they take towards China?
I think the Swiss businessmen are very acute, so they would understand what business risk is about. If they see China as a growth market that would deliver to them revenue and profitability, then they will always have the option of going into that market while maintaining core competence in Switzerland rather than moving it all offshore to mainland China. For the government, it is important for the government to level the playing field. It is not the role of the government to decide where the business should go, but the government can help negotiate the best possible tax treatment, investment protection, open market access, legal framework, and those are the roles of the government.
Frau Lei sagt, also die Schweizer Firmen sollten versuchen, nicht den Anschluss zu verpassen. China ist ein expandierender Markt und da muss man dabei sein, und die Rolle der Regierung könne darin bestehen, nicht den Firmen zu sagen, was sie tun sollen, aber dass man Verträge erarbeitet, die eben sichere Bedingungen gewährleisten für die eigene Wirtschaft. So we say goodbye to our followers and our viewers with a call to friendly coexistence and cooperation.
And mainstreaming the peace agenda. Let's bring peace into the mainstream discussion.
Und neben der friedlichen Koexistenz, wir müssen über den Frieden reden. Die Mainstream-Diskussion soll sich verstärkt um den Frieden drehen. Dr. Lei, many thanks for this highly interesting remarks. Vielen herzlichen Dank für diese interessanten Ausführungen. This is really for me has been a true eye-opener today. Thank you very much. War für mich ein Augenöffner heute Abend. Vielleicht auch für Sie, meine Damen und Herren. Ich danke Ihnen ganz herzlich für die Aufmerksamkeit hier. Weltwoche Daily aus dem Adlon in Berlin. Ich gebe zurück nach Zürich und verabschiede mich im Sinne des Friedens und der friedlichen Koexistenz.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen. You see, die sind auch multisprachlich, unsere Freunde in Taiwan. Alles Gute und bis bald.